and today we will have an MBTW talk. It is a new format that we created to meet experienced professionals from healthcare, from business and technical side, from wellness side, and make an interaction. And uh, today we will have our four speakers discussing how to use AI in the field of depression. And I would like to present our speakers today. So our main speaker today is Ciarán. Ciarán Fox is AI and neurology specialist. And then there is Dr. Liley, who is neuroscience researcher with PhD in experimental psychology. There is Tino Martí, who is business and policy strategist and health economist. And Miloš Zeković, professional coach and mentor in Agile and lean thinking. Today our session will be divided into parts. First will be the presentation of the Ciarán on his topic, and then each of the experts will tell their opinion, share their vision, how was it, do they trust this technology or not, and why, how do they see the perspectives of it in future use cases. And after that we will have question and answer session. Altogether we plan to have from 40 to 60 minute session today. So now I'm welcome Ciarán, please start.
Thank you, Yi. I will share my screen. Bear with me, I'm new with Google Meets. Zoom is usually my playground. If I share window, here we go. Okay, can you see the presentation okay?
Yes, presentation is okay, and if you can speak a bit more louder will be perfect.
Perfect stuff. Hello, briefly, Yi gave me a bit of an introduction. I'll start my timer to make sure that I'm concise as well. My name is Ciarán. I have a background in neurology. I worked as an occupational therapist, and I specialized in neurology, brain injury, rehab specifically, and then I went down a journey myself, working on my own nervous system, my own traumas, and I really struggled with my own mental health, and that led me down a journey of brain coaching, working as a consultant, and then I was always fascinated about artificial intelligence, about systems, about how they relate to each other, about behavior, about, I guess, understanding human nature and consciousness as it is, and how could we interact with it from more of a human point of view, especially from the technology side, which I felt like was missing before I got into technology. I have a background in artificial intelligence and big data, where I studied in Barcelona Technology School of this year. And something that I'm really passionate about is ethical solutions, specifically for cognitive health. Currently, I'm working on solutions specifically with artificial intelligence and supplementation, and also looking at urban mobility within cities, and how can we make mobility within cities smarter and more eco-conscious. Today, we're going to speak a little bit more about AI-driven personalized cognitive training programs, where we obviously have specialists we're going to go a little bit deeper into as well. And the whole point is about transforming the way we treat cognitive deficits in depression. Today, we're going to cover things on a high level. We're going to look at the current landscape, some of the digital tools in AI that help with depression treatment from a data point of view specifically, from a technical point of view. Then we're going to look at how we can personalize this and make the trainings more specific to the individual, and how would we go about this. We'll go a little bit more technical again and look at how do the computers do this through the likes of machine learning, for the likes of cognitive functioning, how can we improve this, and then finally finish on ethics and data safety. So looking briefly at the current landscape, if we take depression as it is, and break it down to its functional components, it creates a cognitive deficit within the person. And this might show up in the executive functioning struggles, so planning, setting goals, and also emotional regulation, managing our emotions throughout the day, with any changes to plans, managing stress can be very difficult. Because of these cognitive deficits, this can also make decision-making more difficult, focus more difficult as well. And overall, this makes participating in our activities of daily life, going about work, our leisure life, a lot more difficult as well. And so how I think AI can really help here is from 2 points of view. One, with cognitive training, working on improving the actual components of cognition, for example, memory, attention, problem solving. but then also in terms of mindfulness techniques, helping the person to become more aware of their senses, their current experience, to view it from a place of non-judgmentalness, and also to then help improve their emotional regulation. And in terms of AI digital tools that can really help here, I think something that's been really interesting to me is how AI or artificial intelligence can help with predictions, helping to identify specifically for therapies and treatments. It can be quite a challenge to make the treatment specific to the person and their needs. And so I think there's a big role for artificial intelligence here. I know that there's some applications, for example, I was looking up the likes of voice assistant technology, helping improve participation of those that were really struggling with depression, which was quite unique and fascinating as a user case. Another area that I think is quite interesting from an AI point of view is how it can help categorize, depending on the depression that the individual may have, there are also subtypes of depression. And so from this point of view, it's very important that we have personalized treatment approaches. And to achieve this, we can really lean on the likes of computers and AI, specifically through machine learning, to help classify depression into distinct subtypes so that we can then create more tailored programming as well for the individual. I wanted to give a general picture just so that you can have a visual of what goes on in the background for the likes of computers and how they take all this information and create insights. If you have a look on the left-hand side, if we take, for example, the likes of maybe the sensor from someone's watch, maybe a questionnaire that they filled out, maybe a transcript from a meeting with the clinician and the individual, or maybe a recording of the person has said on their current experience. And we take that and we do some different works in terms of making the data okay to gather insights, first of all, and then ask key questions. For example, considering is there correlations or relationships between different variables. For example, if someone has a low heart rate for a consistent period of time, is this a higher indication of more severe depression symptoms? If there is more reported feedback in a certain category or certain area, is this also indicating the level of severity and their level of participation throughout the day? So we can gather a little bit more from the big corpus of information to create data-driven insights that can overall benefit the individual, which is the most important thing. We're making decisions to help the person so that they're not affected by the consequences of a lack of data-driven decision-making, which I think is very important. In terms of the role of AI and personalizing AI, instead of having a one-size-fits-all approach, which even from my own background working in hospitals, working in mental health previously, it can be very difficult to be tailored when we're working with masses, especially when systems are challenged with stresses on the wards or stresses in outpatients or in the community. It can be very difficult. And so AI can allow cognitive training to be more tailored to each of the patient or the individual's unique cognitive profile. So through gathering information, through creating insights in this information, and then through gathering these insights to make more data-driven decisions, we can create more tailored specific programming and approaches. And how this looks in general might be that we take the data might be cognitive tests or brain scans or sensors in the mobile or the watch to create a prediction so that we can then create a specific training protocol for that individual. Now, if we look at it a little bit more, we have the likes of our AI models that can analyze the baseline of that person. And if we take, for example, maybe the person's attention or memory or emotional regulation scores, and then we can consider, okay, how is this going to affect the person's programming? And we can do this before the programming begins so that we can start from the get-go with the best possible treatment program for that individual based on the information that we have at our disposal, which would be really great. I mean, that would be really incredible. And so from a machine learning point of view, in terms of how we can impact more cognitive function for the treatment of depression, the importance of machine learning models is so that we can analyze this complex information. And we can take the likes of MRI scans or EEGs or different sensors from the likes of the smartwatch or the mobile. And the purpose here is to be treatment informed through the data so that we can be more strategic with our decision making. So if we take, for example, a specific deficit like memory, we apply the likes of some machine learning, specifically the likes of, for example, support vector machines, which is just a type of way we solve problems in machine learning and the thinking of how AI works. Another one of these way of solving problems is called a random forest. And basically the idea here is that we want to take information that might be complex so that we can identify different classes and clusters to identify, okay, this person might benefit more from this person might not benefit so much from this treatment, so that we can tailor the experience. And then finally, in terms of ethics and data, I think there's some considerations here that make it a challenge to implement a lot of these solutions. I think for a long time, we've had a lot of this technology already available for quite a long time, but I don't think that's been a everyday dinner conversation since the last 2 years. And the talks of artificial intelligence, it seems everyone has their own perspective on it, which is incredible. And it also raises the concern from an ethics point of view and a data point of view, which I think is absolutely essential, which is where is this information going to go? How is it going to be kept person-centered and not technology or capitalistic centered? And how can we make sure that the person at heart is safe and their information is safe and secure as well? When we're dealing with different information, specifically the likes of electronic health records, that if you're working with someone that has depression and we have to pull records specifically from the likes of their clinic or their clinician, then there is a big focus here required on compliance with regulations. This is very important, and this is the big challenge when it comes to tailoring programs for the likes of depression, specifically improving cognitive function. Some areas as well with AI that we also must be aware of is the likes of these models could be biased if they're not properly trained. And if they're not properly trained, then that also can create ineffective treatment. So even though we have information and we have data, how we train that, how we assess that is just as important. And not so much in the answers we're getting, but the process of how we get to that answer and how do we understand that. And that is an area traditionally in AI when we get deeper into more of the deep learning with more unstructured information, that when we extrapolate insights, it can be quite difficult to find out where did this come from this black box, where did the information come from, how did it work? And so it's very important. A final part then to leave on is the transparency in AI. For example, it's very important for clinicians and patients to understand how the decisions are being made, because without trust, we can't facilitate the treatment for the individual. I know for myself, working as a therapist before getting into this area, without trust, we don't have anything. And so having that rapport is so essential, and how AI integrates with that relationship to facilitate that journey in the background, in the infrastructure of the journey for the individual, is very important so that we can maintain those ethical standards. And that's everything from me.
Thank you so much, Ciarán, for your pitch, for your insights. And now I would like to ask our speakers to tell their opinion. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What is your vision? Do you trust this technology and use case? We will have 3 different sides. We will have Anna from healthcare side, Miloš from wellness, and Tino from business side. So please consider your perspective in answering this question. And I would like first to start from Anna.
Hi. Great talk, Ciarán. That was wonderful. I fully agree about the AI model needs to be properly trained. I know there are a few applications that are already developed, such as Wobot. I don't know if you've heard of it, but they can take the participants' information and tailor it based on, what they've reported, their symptomology, their current, physiological state, etc. And then they can tailor their cognitive behavioral therapy treatment to each person who uses this app. So it kind of focuses on, that, what was it, the AI forest training?
Random forest.
Random forest, yeah. So it's taking, they're having a lot of lethargy, lack of interest in doing things, maybe not eating as much as they should. So let's put them in this category, and then their cognitive behavioral therapy will focus on probably motivating factors for them, like start with something small, go eat, a piece of cheese, go for a walk, something like this. And then it also has a big component of the empathy, because a lot of times people with depression need to talk in that moment too. So it's availability and empathy. So they're not waiting, in this case, weeks or months to see a therapist using, an AI app, they can talk to the AI then and there and help get that immediate feedback to help, whatever dire symptom they're having. If they're in a really bad place, right, then they can talk almost immediately and get this empathetic cognitive behavioral feedback. So yeah. A lot of what you said is already being applied. I don't know how well. I haven't personally used these applications or seen them used. But everything needs more training at this point. But I think the key here is to focus on the individual that needs the treatment.
Thank you so much. Tino, maybe your perspective?
Tino, you're muted.
You're muted, yeah, please.
Yeah, sorry. Now you can hear me well. So my perspective, and first, congratulations, Ciarán, for your presentation. I would like to give my reaction from a wider concept of business, so not only including the supply side, but also the demand side, because here is where the issue remains. You can feel that there is a mismatch between the path of change on the technology side and the path of adoption from the demand side. So it's difficult to adopt these technologies that are appearing constantly, but the healthcare system is slow in adopting. The COVID was one exception, I would say, and particularly in the mental health field. This rocket the adoption of digital mental health tools, but this has not continued at the same path. So there are some issues from the adoption point of view that have to be addressed. I would point out 3 of them that I think they are particularly important. One is related with one of the points that you were raising in terms of compliance with regulation and standards. That is the integration of these services within the electronic health records. So I think this is an issue to be addressed. There are some initiatives like the European format for the electronic health record that is under development under the European health data space. This would be one area of avoiding the barrier of integration of solutions into mainstream healthcare. This would be one area. The other area would be funding. Without the specific funding programs that incentivize the adoption at the beginning is difficult. Sometimes you have to change the way you pay providers to adopt the technology because they don't find the incentive for the adoption. While the benefits are there, personalization of services, prediction, anticipation that comes to a better preventive care, and also the increase of effectiveness of better adherence because you are personalizing treatment, they are clear. Another issue, and here is the third element, is how you can raise evidence on the effectiveness while you are introducing a new, what I call a new animal in the field, because we had the traditional, conventional way of providing services, let's say non-digital. Now we have digital mental health tools, and you are here bringing a new animal that is A-based digital mental health. So we will have to compare how effective is these A-based services compared with traditional digital mental health and with traditional non-digital mental health. And there are still a lot of discussions on which is the economic evaluation framework to address this challenge. I will leave it here, and I will hand over to Guy for continuation.
Okay, thank you so much, Tino. And now, Miloš, please, your vision, wellness side.
Wonderful talk. I love that I'm here. I somewhat feel connected to everyone here because I finished computer science, but I'm a business coach and I'm touching wellness and all that also has to do with health a lot. I could talk a lot about this subject, but let me focus maybe on a few things, especially I would say in wellness today, because we have a lot of achievement culture and we have a lot of changes rapidly changing. COVID was just one that was very global, but this is something very pervasive, I would say, today. And I work with a lot of people as coach and organizations going through those transitions and changes. And these changes can trigger anxiety and depression a lot. I wouldn't say I have experience or training for clinical depression, but when we talk about some depression symptoms in coaching, there is certainly something that can be triggered through these changes, and it is triggered. My take on this is that we can use AI a lot to train also people, train clients to a certain degree, and augment coaching, wellness, and health programs a lot. I think that's a pretty safe space, because especially in the beginnings, in training, when we all have a human also being present and diagnosing if needed, or assessing what is going on, I think that there we have today a lot of opportunity to involve AI and technology. That being said, there are some concerns and challenges that I would see on my side because of the limitation of the AI as a tool. So one is in wellness, especially, we want to have a balance between technology and cognitive, but also body and spiritual and cultural. And AI, as far as I know, doesn't have the ability to sense through the human body and to interact in such a way. So all the data that we would feed it goes through our cognitive filters, which has biases, right? And then creates the data that then we train AI. So I would say that's one of the challenge and that we would have with AI. On the other hand, a lot of the depression symptoms, especially behavioral and cognitive, so how you think when you have depression, have a lot of patterns. So we properly categorized the patterns. I can see an AI tool helping somebody after the session with a health specialist or a therapist or a coach, that they can actually cope and develop individually, independently from the coach or specialist, similar to what Anna was saying, someone who is available 24/7, right? But I also see a lack in ability to process the complexity that we as humans being having a physical body, right? Being a social animals have. So I see a difference there, and especially working with different organizations and working with teams as an entity, organization as an entity rather than an individual. I still don't see tools being able to tap into that. So I think now they are limited mostly to individual. How do I address this? And here what I saw is how sensitive are we to culture, right? So recently I had information, I had a client, she went from Southeastern Europe to US, and this is a big cultural change, right, that you have. And then the question is, how did you train a tool that will help her? And how much is it biased between the different cultures, and how much can it be helpful? So how do I personalize having the information about the culture too? So I think those are some of the challenges that I can see, but definitely I think that AI can liberate a lot of the humans in doing more complex work on one end. On the other end, for less complex work, we can have somebody available 24/7 to really help out. And I think that's wonderful to have as an option.
Thank you so much. Now we finished our first part. So each of speakers presented their vision, their thoughts, and now each of us has an opportunity to ask a question to anyone. And we will come to the second part. So in the same order, please, each of us can ask any question. Ciarán, please start. Your mic is off.
Classic. Such a classic mistake. Thank you, Anna. Really interesting hearing all of your different perspectives. I took down some notes. I thought it was really interesting, Anna, what you mentioned about the importance of, and kind of touching on what Miloš, what you said as well, like it needs more training. And if the problems are quite complex in the space, and the individuals all live different lives with different organizations, with different cultures, then for me, what I really see is an opportunity for I don't see a monopoly of a product. I see many, many products based on curious people that are specialists in and passionate about solving that unique problem. And I think we're in a unique space at the moment where the likes of mental health can be revolutionized by those that have struggled and those that have experience in solving those problems with technical backgrounds as well, or working in partnership with technical backgrounds, which I think is incredible. So I really love that comment that you made there, the both of you. And then also in terms of Tino, what you mentioned about the struggles from a practical point of view on implementing these solutions. Like, how do we gather the data? How do from a compliance point of view, how do systems that are slow and muddy and don't move at the pace of computation, how do we integrate that in a way that isn't frustrating from a technical point of view, but also is not that, and that frustration isn't translated into communication from both parties of healthcare and business to the technical side, and how they dance with each other, I think is really unique, because it seems to be very challenging in itself. So I had one question for Miloš in terms of the limitations for these AI applications. How I see it to be is that it's not to make decisions, it's to facilitate the decision maker. And so there has to be a really big part of reinforcement learning, human reinforcement learning, which is something that is not a new thing either, but how that's implemented, I think, is quite unique. And I'm curious, how do you think the likes of that, if for example, if I came to a business and I said, okay, we have this product, this is how we want to integrate it, but I need you guys, you are the decision makers, to also get on board this process, because it's not for me, it's for you. And I don't know your business, you know your business, you know your people. So how can I help marry this new marriage together? I'm curious on some of your thoughts and insights there.
Well, that's a lovely question. And it's something that professional coaches, as a profession, they need to tackle this very question, because in order for the coaching to work as a developmental model, the client needs to take ownership on it. What we usually see, however, in individuals and especially in businesses, is that they want to outsource. So they want to outsource something to be cheap and efficient, and often AI is seen as something that can do that. What we know from the process is that the human connection, the human touch, and the trust is really needed, especially when you have, as we call it, sponsored coaching. So there's somebody who asks that somebody else be coached, right? And what we want to do there is to have a three-way agreement on what it is that also includes confidentiality and ethics. So I think that in that way, we need to really explain what are the necessary conditions, and actually don't engage if they are not met. Because for instance, professional coaches, it would be unprofessional, not unethical, if you would to continue with something like this, right? So I think that the part of the limitation, which we need to be open and talk about it and see how the other side is actually able to do that. And I think that we are here talking about, as you said, facilitation. I would say augmented coaching is, I think, a very good term, right? Or augmented mental health, or whatever we want to have our specialization. So we are actually talking about that. And then, as Anna mentioned, Tino mentioned, like, what's the supply and demand? What can we do 24/7? But also be clear on what an AI cannot do, and when a human is actually needed or preferred as at least the first option. Because in many cases, even when I work with people, I can see that after the initial session, some of the things are simply a repetition of new behaviors, right? That you simply need to work on. And Anna also mentioned there is a certain plan, right? Start with a small thing first, but then build on that over a course of time. And I think that AI can help in that part a lot. Also, there are some business issues and with new trainees and etc. that are easily translated into something that's fairly repeatable, right? So I think very big part will also be, how do we classify complexity of the problem, right? And then say, okay, this is where human, this is human element, and this is AI, right? Before we begin.
Yeah, really interesting.
Thank you so much. Anna, your question?
I'm actually going to just piggyback off of what Miloš was just talking about, because it was a really good topic. So, and also kind of what Ciarán was mentioning, in that, like, the cultural background, but also building the trust and also collecting initial data on each individual's like needs and treatment plan. So I think what this could look like in the future is that the person needing treatment speaks first with a human therapist of sorts. They build that trust and they get data collection based off of these conversations, which then helps like the therapist implement a treatment plan, but also train the AI model based on that person's needs, words, values, whatever, cultural necessities. And then we use the AI platform that has been trained on that person as a tool outside of the therapeutic environment with the human. So it's not like these people are seeing their therapist every single day. They may need more interventions throughout the weeks in between, the days, weeks, hours in between, if they're having a crisis of sorts or, you know, have highs and lows. And that's when the AI tool will be the most valuable, is when they need specific momentary help with their cognitive behavioral, if they need, you know, motivating ideas. I can't get off the couch. What should I do? I can't talk to my therapist. Let me use this AI tool for help in the meantime. And I think this can be tailored to specific cultural environments. Maybe it looks like a different app per, I don't know what country you live in, what continent you live in. I know like every culture has different values, different things that they hold dear, different ways of even communicating about mental health. I know like in the US, you have certain ethnicities that get embarrassed about talking about mental health and don't want to. So it could be that this tool will give them an outlet to kind of address their mental health needs in secret, per se, by using an application instead of actively physically going to see a therapist. And they are still seeking help, but in a more comfortable way for them. And I also want to tag onto this that with further development of these AI applications, you can reach more of the population, especially the rural population that doesn't have a therapist in the city 30 minutes away or something like this. And then this can also go hand in hand with comorbidities such as alcohol use disorder, gambling use disorder, something like this. If they need in the moment some adjustment to help, you know, maybe not relapse and have a drink, they can pull up this app on their phone and have some direction, and maybe, you know, can help them from relapsing. So it has a lot of applications, especially with depression and comorbidities that go along with that.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. Will you have some extra question for someone, or you feel good? We can go next.
I guess I kind of want to see how Ciarán feels about, you know, do you think this might look like a different app for different countries based on like ethnicity and cultural differences, or what do you think this might look like to adapt to the problem?
I think there's one part of like, what do I like think as a human how it would work, and then I think of like the logistics. I kind of put my lean on Tino from a structural point of view. Like, how do we make this actually work in reality? How do we work with systems and organizations and people? And I think from a technical side, it's a technical headache with the amount of data that's required to create a good solution. With that data as well, and like Miloš also said, the importance of defining the complexity, because it's very common of engineers or of technical people to optimize what's not required. And so making sure that we're going in the right direction is very important, and the questions we're asking, which can be timely, because that usually requires conversation between stakeholders from the organizations, from the therapist, getting insights from the individuals and the population that's being served. And so there is this nature of complexity that requires conversation to get to what I would think is a lot more smaller products with smaller data sets that don't have as much regulation, because when we go very big with information, where do we store all that information? And so how can we make this more pocketed? How can we focus more on not many features, but just that one thing? Like, what, like, out of for example, Anna, with your clients, and if I was building a product, what is the one thing that you find is the thing that really your general population struggles with at home, that you think an application and a touch point would help in that one moment? And then how can we test and play around with that in a way that it's so person focused, but also we're not getting caught up in losing the objective. And I think very quickly the objective can be lost because there's so much to dive into.
Thank you.
But I guess there's also kind of like how Tino was saying, you can have very like slow mechanisms of actually like getting this information delivered and acquired, and especially in numerous countries. So yeah, I'm also curious what Tino has to say about how this could be delivered or implemented in different places.
Yeah, I think this is a good point to refine, because my point was more from a public health system, so large scale adoption. But what Ciarán is proposing is to find like niches where you can enter and experiment first and gather all the evidence that then will help you to scale up the solution in a more regulated landscape, which is normally public services. I think also another element here are the end user adopters. So who are going to use the solution? They will be health professionals and patients. Do they require additional digital skills related with AI in order to make use of these new solutions? Or you don't envision that this will be a barrier for adoption?
Thank you, Anna. Tino, maybe you have any question to any of speakers, or maybe you can comment some more, any ideas?
I would like to hear from Ciarán about this digital skills element, if there is an additional need, because when we look at the success rate of implementation, we see some clear barriers. We mentioned some before, like the integration with the EHR system, or no funding available, or not clear evidence that supports the decision from the decision maker to adopt the solution. But we sometimes find the barrier on the end user adoption. And this is because the technology is designed not in a user-friendly way. This could be an option, but normally this is already in much better shape at the moment, because there are more methodologies and technologies to make user-centered services. But on the capacity of adoption from end user, that requires additional digital skills.
Yeah, really great question. And I think what's lacking in healthcare is a lack of products for the user rather than the professional. And even for the professionals, I know from my background when I was working in hospitals, the software sucked. It was bulky. It felt like Microsoft. I hated it. I hated it so much. It felt slow, and that would take a lot of time. And so what I think is very important is more people that are product orientated, that come into that look at this healthcare problem with the solution specifically we're speaking on today, with depression and personalized programs, from the point of view of the user, meaning that the person behind the product must also see through the eyes of that user. And maybe that's a clinician, and maybe that's someone that's experienced it, for example, that has depression, that is a patient that's like, God, I would really love a solution like this. And I think there's going to be a lot more emerging categories of individuals in multiple different sectors of healthcare where there is a bridging. For example, like myself, I have a healthcare background, but I'm really technically minded, and I really wanted to just have control over how could I create things. For me specifically, it was that I'm working on a solution with supplements and AI. But I'm thinking of my lack of routine with taking supplements. I'm thinking of my longevity of, God, like, I know I've got this skin tag, and I know that my dad has this issue and that my mom has that issue, and I'm wondering how will that affect me in the future. But I'm also wondering, oh, I didn't sleep that well last night, so what will I need today? And so that's just from my point of view, and I feel very empowered to maybe create a solution from that point of view. But I think in terms of depression, it will be a lot of someone who's experienced it making the product, and also someone who's treating it making the product as well. And without that person-centeredness, for example, I know for me, and for a lot of populations, gamification. Like my partner has ADHD, and I don't see her use any apps, and then she'll use an app for like 6 months, and I'm like, it's gamified, and it's helping her with any acute anxiety or overwhelm, and I'm like, this is incredible. Like, this was not made by someone in an office that was just money orientated with how many users could we get on the early adoption scale so that we could, satisfy venture capital or any investments that we have. So, yeah.
Thank you, Tino. Miloš, your question?
I just love the conversation and the surge of energy in the last minute or so. That was really nice to see, and my head went into 10 places at least, but we don't have the time. I think that one of the things that maybe we didn't tackle here we are talking now about multi-disciplinary first thing. And then we are also talking about the system. So now we are talking about a system of an AI, client, and a professional, at least one professional. It might be more, depending, right, of who we have. Is it the business, is it not, etc., right? And all of these are intelligent, right? Now with AI, we can say all of these are intelligent to some extent, right? And one of the things that's very interesting for when I work with people, because I work with entities and the dynamics between different people, right? So some of the things that are very interesting for coaching, for instance, and it touches on ethics and touches on a lot of things, is the self-awareness of the professional, of the dynamic between him and the client, and the other stakeholders, let's call them here. So I would really want to ask about the opinion on that, because, for instance, let me give a few examples, right? If the client is depressed and they may feel not okay to share this with a human, went with Anna's example, right? What if they say they're suicidal to an AI, right? So how will AI react to that? Minding the trust thing, because now we have a human that trusts AI, right? And then we have the data. So what do you do with this? And this is something that us humans have not figured out completely how to do. There's no protocol, you have some principles of, right, how you act in these cases. There can also be cases around, let's do the famous one, falling in love for a therapist or something like that, right? So how would the AI maybe deal with that? Or a boss asking for extra reports might be another one that we did not agree. And there's a document of what we agree the report can have, right? To keep the confidentiality and trust. So I think there might be a sort of supervision for AI, that AI needs to reflect on itself and be maybe trained or supervised based on the interactions. That's one aspect. And then the other aspect that I'm very curious about is what's the ability of the AI to actually get the data about that dynamic, right? Because part of that data, huge part of that data, is not cognitive, and it's body language, right? So humans pick that up, and if the human is not present during the AI client interaction, how do we deal with that? So it's a big ball, right? But I'm very curious, where do you see AI at this moment now?
Is that one for me?
Yes.
Yeah, again, a really interesting question. I think it touches on all of our points on the complexity element of, okay, if you have a solution and you're implementing that solution, now that the solution is interacting with people, what are the potential consequences that you're looking that may occur while you're in the direction of trying to get a solution for the person? And I think, again, from a data side, it opens up lots of opportunities that I don't think were available before, and to get really creative, like, for example, with body language and behavior. And I couldn't agree more with the likes of different cognitive dissonance that we all end up having that affects our ability to think clearly. And the most important part, not think clearly on something objective to us, but our own subjective experience, how we're relating to that and seeing in a way that makes sense, like making sense of this complex complexity that we're experiencing, and even knowing that when my body does something or when a situation happens, this reaction is being elicited in this behavior, and that's then affecting my mental health. And so I think I know there's some work currently that I've been looking into, which is on biometrics. So how the likes of a smartwatch can help gather, and we can gather lots of information through connecting to different APIs, like different websites to access their information that they might have. So for example, with Apple Watch, if someone's using an Apple Watch, how can we connect to their HRV? How can we look at their sleep, their steps? And if we can't look at my brain always goes to really complex solutions that when I come back to the world, I'm like, okay, like this is, I'm level 100 here, I need to bring it back to level 1. And that's something I struggle with personally. But in one of the projects I've been working on recently is if we can't look at the body language, for example, of that example there, if we can't see the body language of the person and negotiate that, how can we think like an engineer would in terms of the equipment that the person's using so that they're not having to change their behavior, change the way they have to adopt technology. We're just being smart in what they're already using. Maybe they have a smartwatch and we're just not using the fact that we've tracked over a period of time of 6 weeks that we know that on this and this day, this person has this habit and routine. And so we can see very clearly if there's a break in that, maybe there's a lot less on steps, maybe their heart rate is a lot less, maybe their sleep has been put off. We can then ask better questions on, are you struggling with this at the moment? Is this, has something changed here? And have them as triggers of not needing to delve into reflection, but into rise up on awareness of, oh yeah, like that has happened. And for AI to help with those triggers in a timely manner so that the person, like in my own background, even like back when I was doing coaching, like a lot of the work I would end up doing with business owners specifically was managing them going down this spiral, this negative loop, I've had a really difficult month, it's been horrible, my partner and I are really, we're having lots of arguments. How can we identify that first step that, I didn't prep my meals that night, or, I didn't say hi to my partner when I first came in. I usually always say hi to my partner when I come home. How can we identify that first little trigger that's noticed? It's a very specific use case, so that we can then give that person ownership again. And usually when we're talking about depression, it's when the person is already in that spiral, really struggling, lacking agency. And so how can AI give agency back to the person in a way that we can be creative using what the person already has?
Mm-hmm. Is there enough time to do a counter question?
Short one.
Short one. Okay, so I'm also very curious about, we are talking now, can AI run, for instance, a procedure to scan for patterns in how he is interacting? Because something that we emulate, for instance, in coaching is that if something repeats for a third or fourth time, this is something that we give to the client to reflect on, right? So like, this is the third time you're asking me for this solution. So AI would usually just give the solution, right? But this is the time where a very good coach would actually ask this question, right? So what's going on here? How do you see that? So are there like procedures or protocols that you're aware of that are actually doing that?
This is actually a challenge I've been currently working on in one of the solutions that we're faced with, supplementation. For example, if someone's daily habits are affected, how do we provide them with the nutrition they need in that moment? For example, if I didn't have enough sleep, I'm probably not going to have that much dopamine today to get up to go towards my goals and get going. So how can I have maybe a boost of L-tyrosine to help produce some more dopamine? How can I have some different nutrition to help manage the fact that I didn't get my hour's sleep last night? And so we've been looking at keeping things very simple. For example, like having the likes of a scoring system that if there's a certain threshold that's hit with this scoring system, then it releases a trigger of if this happens over a certain threshold, then this will occur. And so, for example, if there's a change in behavior, or if there is not a change in behavior, there's consistent like you were saying, there's consistent indicators being discussed in coaching, and we need to change that. Well, how can we have a very simple scoring system that when the threshold is met, we give different feedback? And that's where I'm saying working with smaller data sets is very important. You see these large language models, and it's very difficult to make specific solutions. I type into ChatGPT or Claude from Anthropic or Bart or whatever, or X, whatever you use, and I get these general answers, and it just doesn't feel like it was an answer for me. It was an answer for everyone, and that's really what I don't want. I want to feel like I've been listened to, and so smaller data sets that are less data, that's way more critiqued, that can give way better answers, not for everyone, for that person, is a lot more of an like in two parts. One, it's a lot more of a manageable problem, because the dimensional space that we're looking at with all these different features that we have to tweak is a lot less. We can be really objective orientated. And two, we can potentially implement those things for the person and not get caught up. So, but it's challenging. Like that's a really good question, because it is, I think that's one of the biggest problems to solve in terms of implementation is how does it provide the personal feedback, like not for everyone, but for you.
And how does AI get feedback on itself? I think that's also very interesting, because I played with it and I had to give prompts to, no, you have to be this kind of coach because the client is right. So I needed to give 3 or 4 prompts just to get to that personalization that you mentioned. And I think that's very interesting if the AI would be capable of asking and receiving feedback and then adjusting the approach. Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you. I would like to ask 2 last questions before we end. It will be questions to Anna and Tino. Anna, a question from like different side. What are the most dangerous about this idea of helping with depression with AI? What can be the most dangerous? What can be harmful for patients?
My initial response to that is going to be a lack of training. So like, I think like Ciarán mentioned in his talk that, if it's a poorly trained AI and gives, feedback that can be harmful, or, not helpful in the moment and may cause the person to spiral in some way, into the other worsening direction, that is the most harmful for depressive. I'm trying to think of what that would look like. Maybe if it instead triggered the individual instead of giving helpful advice. It really has to know the individual to know, what are your symptoms, what are your triggers, what is helpful for you, what is not. If it's hitting all the wrong notes, you're going to send the individual in the other direction.
Thank you. And last question, Tina, if a person wants to do a startup in AI and helping depression or other treatments, what can be his options? Can you just maybe give some motivational or just logical advices on a healthcare startup person who is only potential co-founder? What can you give him advice?
Yeah, I will say that the most challenging part of starting up is to get lost in the death valley and be unable to deploy your solution, because there are all these barriers that we were discussing. So how to avoid this? I would say try to find the area where the costs are lower than the benefits in terms of adoption. So if you have to comply with many standards to get integrated the solution, to get finally contracted, maybe it doesn't pay off. And it's better to find a niche, a specific area where you don't have to integrate at the beginning, but then you can move fast, show that your solution brings value, and then you will scale up to this more demanding environment. So I would say start small in a niche and move fast and get evidence of the value that you are providing.
Okay, thank you. So it was our session about AI and depression. Thanks everyone, each of you that you have joined our talk, and keep in touch. We have our mental growth community group in Facebook, and from time to time we will have more MBTW talks For example, next our talk will be on 26th of September, and the topic will be prompt engineering for relationship dynamics. So we will talk about conversational AI exactly for conflict resolution. So it will be also interesting topic. Welcome you to join, and keep in touch. See you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you.